Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1274 and today's date is May 8th, 2017 and the title of the episode is Central Banks Prep for the Collapse by Shifting the Narrative. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now in the last couple of reports we've been talking about Home Capital Group. And we understand they received a bailout of about $2 billion or so. They already went through the $1 billion already, and they're almost halfway through the other $1 billion at this point. But something very interesting is that people are realizing that this financial institution is in big, big trouble. And people are pulling their funds out of this system right here. Because they understand that when this goes down, they're going to lose their money. Now, those people who are not pulling it out, well, they're going to lose pretty much everything if they don't do this right now. And why wouldn't you? Why would you leave your funds there? Because when we look at this, and we go back to April 28th, there was about $521 million in the system. May 1st, it dropped down to $391 million. As of May 8th, today, people have been taking their funds, their currency, out of the bank, and it has dropped to $192 million. And you can see, just from May 1st to May 8th, well, it has really changed. Actually, right now, the bank is down by 90% since March 28th. This is what a bank run looks like, where people come in and they try to get as much as they possibly can before the system collapses. And we're watching this right now. And we can see at this point that most likely this whole thing is going to collapse unless they get an influx of some other type of bailout to help it along here. Because as more and more individuals take their funds out of the system will not be able to survive. We saw this in Greece, where the people realized and they understood that, okay, we see what's happening here. Let's get as much as we can out of the system. Cyprus wasn't as lucky. So when the system starts to come down, you don't want to be on the end where like, oh, should I go to the bank and should I take my currency out? Because at that point, most likely it's going to be too late. Because once just one bank and then another bank and another bank start to fail, right there and then, the first number of people who run to the bank, they will get their funds. The rest, they will never get it. And we can see already the $192 million, most likely they're going to shut it down and say, okay, nobody can take out any more. They're probably going to stop it at some point, and it looks like we're getting very close to that. So you don't want to be behind the curve, you want to be ahead of the curve, and you want to make sure that you have the ability to take your funds out of there. This is why my personal opinion is that you only keep as much as you need in the system, because once it collapses, once the whole thing starts to fall apart, it's going to be very difficult to get to your funds. We are now seeing that because of what is happening in retail, which we discussed, that no, online sales is not taking over for brick and mortar just yet. It's only about 8% or so of the total retail sales. What is happening right now is retail is collapsing on itself because people, well, they don't have the jobs, they don't have the extra money, and people are not spending. This is the big problem. Even though they tell us that we're at 4.4%, this is a manipulated number to make you believe that we're at full employment, which we are not. And we can see right now, because of all these stores that have been closing, and you have to remember how retail is calculated. Remember, they're going to tell you that retail sales are still doing well, because just because stores close down and you see them go out of business, and let's say they go out of business next week, they don't just cut off the sales and say, okay, this store no longer has sales. They take those sales and they project it out for the rest of the year, and they remove it slowly over the year. So it looks like the economy's still doing really well when it really isn't. And because of all these stores that are closing, we're going to have a lot of retail space, a lot of commercial space. And what we're seeing right now is that commercial real estate loan delinquencies, well, they're starting to rise. We're having a lot of space. The retailers, well, they can't pay for this space anymore. And we're starting to see a lot of delinquencies. And as more and more of these retail shops declare bankruptcy, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. And this is like a domino effect. We just clicked off the first domino, it hit the second domino, and it's just going to continue on. The same thing in Canada with the home capital goods. This is just the first domino to fall, and it's going to accelerate as we move forward, because we have to remember there are so many things going on in the economy right now where we're looking at each one of these economic sectors, and each one has its own problems. I mean, GDP came in at 0.7%, even if it was 1% or 1.1%. That is the manipulated number. That is the disaster. Industrial production, down. Manufacturing, down. We know retail sales, down. Housing, it has come to a standstill. The bubbles have reached the top, and the whole thing's going to be a disaster. Then we have the student loan problem, where more and more individuals are taking out these loans. They can't pay for them. They can't find jobs. And if they can't find jobs, they can't pay for them. They modify the loans, but they still can't make those payments. A lot of these individuals are living with their parents. And what we're seeing right now is that the Department of Education, well, they're having a problem collecting on defaulted student loans. And it has come to a complete standstill in the last month, leaving an estimated 91,000 accounts in limbo, when the agency ordered the debt collectors under contract to stop making collections on the accounts. Now, why did this happen? Well, it's a strange turn of events which began with a lawsuit filed by two debt collector companies who claimed they were unfairly fired by the Obama-era Education Department for poor performance. On March 29th, the judge issued a temporary restraining order that prevented any new defaulted borrowers from being assigned to debt collectors and put into rehabilitation programs. On April 21st, the government ordered the debt collectors involved in the suit to stop work altogether on defaulted accounts. The Education Department and the Justice Department are partly to blame for the unnecessarily throwing a wrench into the entire defaulted loan system. Meanwhile, these individuals, they are racking up a ton of charges as more interest accrues on their loans, and they are going to be responsible for all this because they are not taking it out of their bank accounts right now, which is completely unfair at this point. But we can see this whole student loan system where individuals cannot find high-paying jobs, they can't pay back their loans. It is in trouble, and it is collapsing right in front of us. And this is going to be a huge problem. Now, Ben Bernanke, former Fed chairman, he is out there and he is trying to explain to us why Trump's tax cuts, well, it's not a very good time for him to do this. Now, does it really matter at this point? No, the economy's collapsing. The tax cuts aren't going to do anything. And he said it would have made more sense to have these tax cuts back in 2012 or 2013. Very interesting. But he says, I admit there's a lot of people left out of the recovery. Yes, just a few were left out of the recovery. Basically, it was all done for the 1% or above the 1%, and the rest of the country was completely left out of it. But he's trying to convince everyone, and this was during an interview, that things look pretty darn good. And he's saying that the first quarter of this year was an aberration, and that's not the true strength of the economy right now. And when we look at the U.S. GDP growth quarter on quarter, we go back to when he was the chairman in the Federal Reserve, we can see that the GDP was around 2%, and we entered a recession. And we look now and we see that the GDP numbers the first quarter came in at 0.7%, and he's saying this is just an aberration. Now, we need to remember, and we need to go back in time to 2008, where he was, during an interview, he was telling everyone how great the economy is doing, how the economy was strong, how people don't have to worry about housing prices going down, how people don't have to worry about the economy because there is no forecast of any type of recession going on whatsoever. And if you want to see that interview, it is on the X22Report.com site, and you can play it right on the site, or if you want to click, you can play it on YouTube. And he explains how strong the economy is. And when I was listening to this, It almost sounds exactly what they are saying right now, where they're creating this narrative to convince us of how great the economy is. And don't worry about these ridiculous manipulated low numbers, because we tried to manipulate them higher and then we just couldn't. And don't worry about them because it's transitory, it's an aberration. They really don't matter because you need to believe us. The economy is strong. So we've heard from all different Fed individuals, Fed governors, telling us how great the economy is, how we're at full employment, how the economy's way above its potential, how we need these interest rate hikes. And then we have former Fed Governor Kevin Marsh. And he basically slammed the Fed during a speech delivered at the Hoover Fed conference, admitting the central bank had no real normalization strategy. And when he looks at the situation and he sees what is going on, he said, the last time I saw such uniformity of opinion was just before the 2007 crash. So what is happening here is that the Fed, they're trying to get their act together. They're creating this narrative to convince us of why the economy is strong, because what is happening in the background right now is that the economy is ripping itself apart. And it's going to get worse, a lot worse, as we move throughout this spring into summer and then into fall. And they're trying to build this narrative right now of how great things are. It's almost like when Bernanke came out prior to the crash in 2008, while he was in 2008 speaking in this interview about how great the economy was doing and how strong it was and how it's impossible for any of these things to happen where the housing prices come down or anything else, we can see they're doing the same exact thing. The question is, why? They're doing it because they need to set up the narrative for the collapse. They're going to begin, well, they have started, but they're going to continue on throughout the spring and summer, where they're going to convince everyone that the economy is very strong. And as the economy deteriorates, they're going to try to push the stock market up. They're going to explain away why all these things are happening. They're going to say, please don't believe these numbers. It's an aberration. It's transitory. It's just going to get a lot better as we get to the latter part of this year. And this is all part of their plan to convince everyone. And the corporate media, believe me, is going to spew this all out there. Whatever the Fed's saying, they're going to be out there saying the same exact thing, where they're trying to tell you that everything is fine until the last moment when the system comes down. And they will have in place either an individual, a country, or a group to blame why the economy fell apart all of a sudden. And when this system does fall apart, just like we saw with home capital goods, they're going to quickly react. They're not going to wait and say, okay, let's see how many people take their money out of the bank. No, what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, bank holiday. Actually, most likely they'll probably do this on a Friday, because this way it'll catch people off guard, where they say, okay, all of a sudden things started to happen. We need a bank holiday, but don't worry, it'll only be through the weekend. And we're going to have to put capital controls where we're going to shut it down right now. And maybe when we open on Monday, things might be fine, or we might have 1 or 2 days of capital controls. And we know that this is not going to last to 1 or 2 days. When you hear that, okay, we need to close the banks because some type of an event happened, you are too late. You will not be able to get your funds out of the bank. They are stuck in there. And according from many sources and individuals, the electronic currency is just going to disappear. Actually, it actually did disappear when you look at the people in Cyprus. Those accounts, they were replaced with worthless bank stock. So their funds actually really did disappear, because what do you do with bank stock? You can't do anything with it. And the same thing's going to happen, where the electronic currency is just going to disappear. And yes, people are going to be very, very angry. And this is why I do believe they have something planned to shift everyone to point the finger at someone else. Maybe it'll be at Trump. Maybe it'll be at North Korea. Maybe they'll point the finger at Iran, Syria, China, and they will blame these other groups or a person. and say, we were not responsible for this. We've been telling you all along how great the economy has been. And we can see from their actions, or Trump's actions, or from China, or from maybe even Russia, North Korea, they're the ones who turn the economy upside down. And now we're going to do everything we possibly can to help out, which means lowering the interest rates, which means creating more stimulus, which means we're going to see a huge amount of inflation, which means that people are not going to believe this anymore, because what are they going to do? Just create more and more currency and give it to the banks? At this point, what does that do? It inflates the bubbles. And once the bubbles come down, they will inflate it as much as they possibly can, and then the bubbles will pop again. So I've said this from the beginning, for a long time ago, where I believe this is going to happen in two phases, where we'll get the initial collapse, which will allow the central bank to lower the rates, which will allow the central bank to start creating currency like crazy. They'll try to inflate as much as they possibly can, and we'll be hit with another event of some type. What that is, we don't know yet. But then the economy will come down once again, and this time it will be pretty much done. And they will have the proof, and they'll have all the information of who did it, why they did it, and we need to go after them. So if you haven't prepared and you're not ready, I would start and prepare and get ready. And what that means is have food, water, supplies, pharmaceuticals, have gold, silver, have cash on hand, because you'll need that first. Make sure you have a weapon to protect your family. Make sure you have the ability to move out of your area, just in case. If you live in a very populated area, there might be riots, people not understanding what's going on. So when you see all of this start to happen, you need to be ready and prepared. And I actually would make a plan with your family of where to meet if things start to go south. So get prepared, get ready, because we can see they already have their plan and it's already in motion. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.